All right. Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Debate. I am Sparrow and this is my co-host Sweet Pea, and we will be your moderators for this debate. Our topic today is, should trans people use the bathroom they prefer? And this promises to be an excellent debate. We have Jax arguing that trans people should use the bathroom they prefer, and Kaiser Sultan bringing the opposition. We will have up to a 10-minute opening per side, 45 minutes of open dialogue, and a short closing statement followed by audience questions. Remember to tag the moderators with your questions for our debaters. Little reminder to attack the argument and not the debaters or each other. Now, since you're not here to listen to me, let's get to the show. Jax is going first. You have 10 minutes if needed. Your time starts now.
Hi all, thanks for having me, and thank you to Kaiser for coming out to talk to me today. So I'm going to be talking today about why I believe trans people should be allowed to use the bathroom they prefer. The main points that I want to address are there isn't really a reason that they shouldn't be. So normally when we start with the freedoms that people have, we start by giving them all the freedoms and then we work backwards and we limit those freedoms as is necessary to protect everyone else's. I think today in this debate, I'd like to show that this is not a freedom that needs to be limited because the amount of infringement on other people's freedoms is minimal. And furthermore, I would like to point to evidence in countries and areas in the United States, which is where I'm from, where these sorts of things have been allowed already, and we've seen no significant increase in crime or anything, bad related to them. So I think that's about all I wanted to say as an opening. I know I didn't take nearly as much time as I was given, but I think I can pass it over to Kaiser whenever he's ready.
Thank you very much for your opening statement, Jax. We will now turn to Kaiser Sultan for their opening. Take it away, Kaiser Sultan. The mic is now yours.
Hey, you guys can hear me? Hello?
Yep,
Yes,
yeah, we
we
got
can
you.
hear you.
Yeah. So, I just want to say that, so I've just, I guess 3 points as well. It's probably going to be short. The first would be that, the basis for, segregating bathrooms is, biological sex, not, whatever someone identifies as. So I don't think, whatever anyone's identity is really plays into that. The second point would be that the vast majority of bathrooms available to the public in the United States are in private institutions, and so it should be up to the private business or institution to determine their own policy. And the third would be that, um, actually, yeah, I'll just stick with those 2 points for now. That'll be my opening.
Kaiser Sultan for your opening. We will now move into the open dialogue where you both will have up to 45 minutes to cross-examine each other. This is your open discussion time. All right, begin.
All right,
I'll let you start, man.
cool, thanks. So I kind of want to go first into what you talked about for private businesses. You talk about the idea that this sort of legislation shouldn't be put into effect because it would legislate whether or not a private business can make the decision to do certain things. So I kind of want to back up and ask, like, all right, what are your views on, for example, um, I- this is one example of this would be like separate bathrooms for people of different races would be something that we've legislated that you can't legally do, but it still infringes on a business's public right or private right to decide those things.
Yeah. I think the civil rights law was good in preventing that.
Yeah, so how does that kind of tie into your idea that, where do we draw that line? Or where would you say that we draw the line where we can infringe on these private businesses' rights to decide? Because a lot of people, and typically historically in the US, we draw a line where you're not able to discriminate against people oftentimes on things that they're unable to change or things that are pretty baked into who they are as a person. So an example would be,
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
well, yeah, I got you. Well, I would say that your race or your physical features that you're born with is something that is inherent to you. You can't change it. However, changing your gender, whatever, is an action that you consciously take. So really, one would be discriminating against a physical feature, the other one would be discriminating against an action. And so I don't think discriminating against an action is the same as discriminating against a physical feature.
Okay, interesting. So would you consider something similar like, would you consider homosexuality to be an action or a decision that somebody makes?
I'm not sure what the literature is on that, so I'm not going to speak on it.
Okay, that's fair. I
But
th
I mean, I can concede the point to you if you believe it's not an action. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so if we go with the idea that it's not an action and that these people are genuinely made a way that builds this into their character, would you be able to concede that maybe this is something where we shouldn't, you know, be able to discriminate against people?
No, because the manifestation of it is a action, right? So, for example, if if hypothetically, right, you had a situation where a business was like, okay, we're gonna ban homosexual people, then there's no way to distinguish between a straight person and a gay person. However, if someone were to then openly proclaim their homosexuality or whatever in this instance, then that would become a behavior which is being banned, right? So I'm drawing the line at whether or not it's an action or whether or not it's a physical characteristic.
Okay, interesting. So what if a trans person was not to assert the fact that they were trans when they went into this business and you were unable to tell that they were trans? So essentially,
Well,
uh,
mhm.
like somebody who was born a male is presenting female to the point where you cannot tell they're dressed as a woman, all of these things, and they go into the girl's bathroom. What's to stop them other than legislation, or what would be the purpose of stopping them from doing that?
Well, I mean the societal basis for segregating bathrooms on biological sex in the first place is some form of, I guess, courtesy or accommodation for perhaps one gender not wanting to be around the other in a vulnerable position, right? So, to that, I would say that if someone is, you can't tell if they're trans and not actually a biological woman, then the people in the bathroom probably wouldn't be able to tell, so that accommodation wouldn't be necessary because they wouldn't feel uncomfortable.
Okay, so the idea of keeping the legislation to prevent people that are trans with using the identity that they, or using the bathroom that matches their identity would be based off of the comfort of others and whether or not you're infringing on that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's part of it. I guess it would be the reason for segregating bathrooms. I guess you could say is sort of a matrix of reasons. So you have one which is, societal convention, which, I'm going to concede that changes over time and stuff. The other one is perhaps some women argue is for being uncomfortable. Some say it's for, they feel threatened or unsafe. Some just feel emotional, like being comfortable with it, which I guess goes back to the comfort. So, um, because the reasons for banning it are sort of subjective, then I would say that um, attempting to prevent people from using a bathroom, uh, what do you say? Preventing people, right? So legislation that would stop trans people from being banned. You get what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So that legislation would first have to how do you say it? Quantify perhaps the subjective realities around um, segregating bathrooms by gender. I think that's too difficult to do, so I don't think they'll be able to do it.
Well, if you go to a level of subjectivity that's, really open to the point where what it comes down to is what someone identifies as, I think you kind of eliminate that problem. If
But
the
yeah, but, uh-huh.
if the legislature is more about, okay, were they in the bathroom that they identified with? Yes or no? It would really be about taking the limits off of who can go into what bathroom no matter what. Because really, I see no issue with going into whatever bathroom you want as long as you're not bothering anybody. And if somebody's bothered by somebody else in the bathroom, it happens. If they're not doing anything purposely to go out of their way to bother you, I don't think that we can really be concerned with how upset people are that they see a certain person in the bathroom.
I understand that, but what I'm saying, right, is that the basis for segregating the bathrooms isn't how one presents themselves or one, identifies as. It's the biological sex. Now, in most cases, I would argue the overwhelming number of cases, even amongst people that are trans, um, whether or not someone is biologically male or female is pretty, you can generally uh, figure that out just from observation. So what I'm saying is that because the basis for segregating it is biological sex, and that is very easily determinable in a lot of cases, in the vast majority of cases, by observation, then you should just keep the status quo that way. If someone is trans, like you said, and they're able to pass, and like no one's, you know, worried about it, and or if someone is there, uh, someone is trans and go in the bathroom, and people figure out they're trans, and no one complains about it, what's the issue? What I'm saying is that uh, instituting legislation that specifically bans you from segregating bathrooms based on biological gender, I'm against that.
Okay, how would you argue that you could enforce that? Like would it be a complaint system? I just don't see that that's feasible. And I also don't see, I think if we dig really down to the root of what you're talking about, I don't see what the premise is for separating the bathrooms based on biological sex in the first place, other than people aren't comfortable with it and it's something that's societally constructed. But again, I don't see a way to, I don't see why we should support the status quo here, especially when I think that we're given pretty compelling reasons not to.
Well, you said how are you going to enforce it? Well, how about just the current system where when people feel uncomfortable, they voice it out? I mean, what's wrong with that?
That's cool, and I think that people should be able to voice whether or not they're comfortable, no matter what it is. But I also think that we need to talk about whether or not people should be able to make, you know, actual policies that discriminate against people. If we had a
Wait, so,
policy,
so your point,
sorry, go ahead.
good. Okay, so I was gonna say, so your point basically, and correct me if I'm summarizing this incorrectly, is that the discomfort of people using a bathroom with a trans person is not as important as the discomfort of a trans person not being allowed to use the bathroom they identify with.
Yeah, I think I would be willing to stand by that. And I think that you could evidence that by looking at the statistics of suicidality and depression and mental illness in trans people and looking at how all of the literature we have, and obviously this is still being researched. I'm always open to see new information, but as of now, the literature is pretty commonly at the consensus that denying these people the identities that they are so built into their core character is extremely, extremely bad for them. Whereas somebody being uncomfortable that, they see someone that might look more or less feminine or masculine in the bathroom is really not making that big of a difference. I don't want to discount those people's discomfort, but I do want to say that, like, I don't think that there are any records of somebody killing themselves over seeing a trans person in the bathroom.
I would say I don't think there actually is the literature actually isn't there to say that suicidality, the suicide rate and self-harm rate amongst trans people is due to um, societal acceptance. I think that first of all, most of the studies, um, how would you say it? And I'm trying to say this carefully so I don't like um, be disrespectful, but
Yeah.
um, the literature does not differentiate. You cannot draw that the cause for self-harm and suicide is because of societal acceptance any more than it's a side effect of gender dysphoria itself.
Okay, I think you're talking about causality versus correlation, which is important. I agree, and it's really, really hard, nigh impossible for us to draw causal relationships between two things. But we can look at, correlatory relationships between two things, and we see that recognizing these people's identities as what they see themselves as has a very, very high correlation with their decreasing the rate of suicide, which I think.
You have a statistic for that? Because I haven't seen that anywhere. Over a long-term study, I haven't seen that anywhere.
I
I don't
can.
think it exists. Because first of all, how do you measure that?
How do you measure that? Well, we have statistics on how
You'd
many
be able to.
people we have statistics on how many people kill themselves, and typically the way these studies
Mhm.
work is they would look at those statistics and then they would match them up with legislation that prevents discrimination against certain minority groups, in this case transgender people. And we would see that there's significant overlap between those legislations being passed and a significant decrease in the suicidality.
I don't actually think that's true. I think what happens is the distinction between, first of all, how would you say it? First of all, the legislation hasn't been around long enough for us for the same time period as studies on suicide rate amongst people with gender dysphoria. So I don't think, first of all, you can draw that conclusion concretely. Secondly, the point still stands that you're inferring causation from the correlation, which you cannot give any more credence to than saying that it's simply a manifestation of gender dysphoria itself. So my, I mean, this is interesting, but I think because the data and everything isn't 100% concrete yet, we're gonna go back and forth on this. So I would say that regardless, um, it is how would you say it? It is beneficial to it improves the suicide rate if you accept someone's gender identity. I don't think. I mean, first you have to say how much of a subset of that is, using bathrooms. I mean, there's practical solutions you can have as well, right? You just have a third bathroom for anyone that isn't biologically male or female, or uh, is gender dysphoric or non-binary or intersex or whatever. That's a practical solution you can have.
Hmm.
But I still maintain that because the societal basis for the segregation is biological sex, not gender identity, that you shouldn't you shouldn't basically reverse that.
Okay. I don't think that the whole having a separate bathroom is a super practical solution because the solution on the other side is we let people use the bathrooms that they want, and the solution that you're proposing is we build a new bathroom at every facility across the entire world for a very small subset of the population. Because, like,
Not the
I can
entire world,
acknowledge.
right?
Well, yeah,
That
sure. But okay, let's just like narrow it down to the U.S. or even certain facilities in the U.S. We talk about, you know, how few trans people there are in proportion to the entire population. I just really don't think that it's a feasible solution to go through, invest all the money in those facilities for a very small percentage of the population, especially considering they want to use the bathrooms that they identify with. So it just seems like a lose-lose situation. Like we lose more money than we need to, and also these people aren't really getting the ideal treatment they would like.
well, like I said before, the majority of bathrooms accessible to the public are in private institutions, right? So I already clarified that in that instance, it's up to the institution to determine their policy. So, I mean, if you want to talk about building a third bathroom stall, libraries, and government buildings and stuff, I can't imagine it's that much of a increased cost to just divide off one of the stalls. But regardless, you said yourself that it's such a small percentage of the population. Then why not just keep things as they are, and then as a because it's such a small percentage of the population. If someone is in the instance where they use the bathroom they identify with and they're asked to, go use the other one, they can just go use the other one. I really don't see this being as much of an issue as it is. I think really the underlying the underlying issue people are trying to address is whether or is to what degree society has to accept someone's gender identity. And I don't think that's a basis for, you know, legislating how people divide their bathrooms. I don't see the argument for it.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand really what you think the benefit of keeping things the way they are is, other than, so is it just based around the discomfort that other people would feel if they saw someone that they believed to not belong in their bathroom go there?
But
Like,
I
is
mean,
that,
I'm trying to say that.
sorry, go ahead.
So what I'm saying is that uh, you're proposing a change, right? And
Hmm.
we don't know what the effects of that are going to be because, I mean, it's just a fact that the changes haven't been implemented for a long enough time frame. And to be quite frank, I personally agree with you where I don't think there's going to be any increase in violence or assault or anything like that. What I'm saying is that fundamentally, what you're talking about here is an issue of discomfort between one group and another group.
Hmm.
And I don't even think it's a fact that I think a lot of women will probably, if someone who's trans walks in, they probably won't bat an eye, right?
Totally.
But it's a large, good.
So earlier you kind of made the concession just for the sake of the argument that we can compare being trans to an extent with something like a biological reality. For example, race. Um,
I didn't concede that. I made the distinction between the two.
okay, so you wouldn't say we can make that concession here. You wouldn't say that we can accept that maybe like homosexuality or race are something that, is kind of similarly baked in as the same way that, transgender identity is.
Yeah, the reason I made a distinction is because one is a physical characteristic and the other one is a behavior. And so whether or not a behavior is, biologically ingrained in you or whatever, that's irrelevant. It's still a behavior. A physical characteristic is something you're born with that is presentable to everyone, regardless of whether or not you're awake or asleep, whether or not you say anything, you don't do anything. It's just apparent. So I don't think they're the same.
Okay. I think that there's kind of like a binary that's being drawn here that doesn't really exist though, because when you are to look at somebody who is, uh, for example, a bunch of races mixed together on the street, and I asked you to point to them and tell me what race they were, you wouldn't probably be able to tell, right? Uh, Whereas you could probably tell somebody's culture based off how they choose to present themselves, but we still wouldn't make it okay to discriminate against somebody based off of their culture.
I mean, we do, right? So, for example, we do discriminate people against a culture. For example, people that identify with white nationalist movements. That's a culture that we discriminate against,
Okay, yeah,
and it's good that we do.
yeah, but we're also talking about a culture that infringes on people's rights versus a culture that doesn't.
I
I
know
would argue
that,
that
but what I'm saying is,
you're saying,
my point is that you cannot equate culture with someone's physical characteristics.
I would agree, but I would also agree that, or
For
I would also,
example,
I would argue that
go ahead.
it is not as simple as saying that, a transgender identity is something that people decide, right? Like when we're talking about mental illness, these people aren't making the
Uh,
decision to be really upset with the body they're in, right? And we have years and years of attempted conversion therapy going on, trying to convert people like this into people that are cisgender or heterosexual, however you want to refer to it. And we see no success with those things. So I really think that like we've been given a lot of reason to believe we should at least try alternatives like accepting these people's identities, and we haven't been given much reason, or really any reason at all, to believe that rejecting these people's identities is better for them or society.
I mean, my point is that the literature isn't there to say whether or not it's beneficial or not. I mean, short term, what you can say is that the suicide rate amongst transgender people is the same before and after transition, which really points to the fact that perhaps either the transition techniques we have aren't sufficient enough, or that we need to find a new method of medication, whether or not that's and that's going to go into more research with regards to gender dysphoria and stuff like that.
I
But
would
the
I would
point
push
still
back on the
stands.
whole. I would push back on the point that you just made about surgery not improving the suicidality rate. There's a lot of research going into the fact that, especially in the long term, we see a lot of very good results after these surgeries. Like, I agree with you. The literature has not been around super long. We could see some changes. Things are still ambiguous, but as of right now, we're seeing like a pretty good increase in people's mental health after post surgery. I mean, here's a
I mean,
study
that's short
from,
term, right?
right, yeah, but uh, we have
So
to
then,
go off
how
of the.
can you ascribe that to gender and not just the emotional improvement that comes from intaking, you know, first of all, from intaking post surgery, you have an increase in hormones. So, beyond your hormone replacement therapy that you take, so there's that. Then there's also the fact that if someone believes that they have that, they're born in the wrong body, and then after surgery, for a while, they're probably going to feel better. The point is that long term, there isn't any um way to say whether or not that's an improvement, and so you can't base policy and changing societal norms based off of short-term studies over people who are, first of all, already in a really bad state. I mean, you said yourself, a lot of them face discrimination and stuff like that. A lot of them have other mental, just gender dysphoria that they, suffer from. So I don't think you can point to that as a short-term study, which in itself is not. I mean, I'm not I'm not going to go into it with regards to methodology and sample group and sample size and stuff like that. But basing this off of short-term studies is not a good idea because you don't know what's going to happen. And the long-term trend is still that the suicide rate stays pretty much the same. So you can't, like I said, you can't make policy over, yeah, in the short term seems to be working. Let's keep pushing it. That's not a smart idea.
Well, I don't think that the long-term trend shows that suicidality remains the same. I mean, you said it yourself. These surgeries are a developing technology that we're pretty much just getting into the mainstream. So we really don't have any long-term information about whether or not suicidality increases or decreases.
That's gonna allow these people to, like surgery and medical techniques that aren't, finalized and safe enough where they can be, done en masse without any hindrances. That's another thing we have to discuss. The fact that, the rate of surgery is going up and the rate of gender dysphoria is going up, and this is causing the medical industry to be able to overcharge people and put people in debt over surgery that they may or may not necessarily even need. What's the rate of accurate diagnosis? All of these issues uh, underlie the discussion you're having, which is how much should society, accept someone's gender identity. And so I'm trying to, like I said, we're going to go back and forth on this because the literature is so diverse
Hmm.
and it's so varied. So I want to stick to the, rather than saying that your point is that the bathroom acceptance is simply a manifestation of general societal acceptance. And what I'm saying is that um, because that societal acceptance issue is not something that we can definitively say for sure, then I don't think you can hold that point. You have to argue it from a different view.
Okay, so you're saying that the evidence that we have that accepting people's gender identities is significantly beneficial for their mental health is not something that we should consider when legislating around those things.
I'm saying the characterization that it's solid undisputed proof is not there. And so until you have that, let's not make any policy changes.
Okay. I think that there's pretty solid evidence that accepting people's gender identities here is really quite, successful. Not to mention the fact that, we have decades and decades of stuff like conversion therapy that we know don't work. So we have like affirmative answers about what doesn't work. And we have some good ground to go off of for what does work. I wouldn't say that I would
Okay.
never be close to backing up if we get better evidence or if something changes. But as of right now, we have to go off the best evidence that we have. And all of the best evidence that we have
But I
points.
mean, you can't say that in regards to like, doing massive invasive surgery on people. I think that's the point where people are okay. If when you get to the point where you're having surgery to the point where, people are in post care for weeks and months at a time,
Mhm.
and the rate for surgical error is still quite high, I don't think we should be pushing that as
Wait,
a
when you
solution
when you say
just
the rate
because
of
we don't.
surgical error, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, the amount of people that have gone through surgery and then later discovered that they were misdiagnosed with gender dysphoria, that rate is rising very high. You also have literal physical errors in the surgery, and that rate is quite high,
Wait,
especially with regard.
do we have
Mhm.
sources for things like I think that it's fair to say that we would see an increase in misdiagnoses of these things. I don't think that that's an increase that's really a huge problem, and I haven't really seen any evidence that it is. I'm open to see some evidence that there's like some enormous misdiagnosis of these things and that an enormous, a very large, notable proportion of the people going through these surgeries regret it. I haven't seen any evidence like that. And I have seen that, like, here, I don't know if you're keeping track of the chat here, but Jahan just sent a pretty good study by PubMed where this is a 40-year follow-up surgery on gender affirming surgery, a 40-year follow-up study on gender affirming surgery where we see that there are positive long-term outcomes. I mean that
Okay, well,
we have some long-term
mhm.
evidence here. I think that the problem is we're talking about something that's like, okay, we know there are negative effects to keeping things the way that they are right now. Why would we not act on the best evidence we
We
have?
don't. Again, I'm arguing the point that we don't have evidence that keeping things away right now is negative. I'm saying that forcing people to use the bathroom they are biologically, based on their biological sex, if they're not able to present themselves, convincingly enough that most people wouldn't notice, is not contributing or is not a significant factor in suicide rates among transgender people. That's my point.
And how would you back that up?
And because the literature for that doesn't exist.
I mean, there is
And
significant literature that acceptance of these people and affirming the identities that they see for themselves increases their mental health. They do better when they're recognized as the people that they see themselves as. I mean, there's like a lot of research into this, not just recently. We have, the past decade or two, we have some really good research going into the fact that affirming these people's identities is really good for them. Like, is that
in
just
in
non-existent or?
no, what I'm saying, right? What I'm saying is that the literature exists for both arguments. The argument that I'm making and the argument that you're making. That's the point I'm making.
So you're saying that literature exists that says that letting only trans people that can present convincingly into bathrooms doesn't
No,
make a
that's what I'm saying.
difference?
I'm saying that I said that there's a significant body of literature that exists that shows that gender surgery does not have a significant effect on suicide. That's my point. But that's what I'm trying to say, that this entire issue is gonna us going back and forth and me quoting one study and you quoting another study, and then I'm gonna discredit the sample size and the method, and you're gonna turn around and say, well, the guy that conducted my study had this issue and is biased. I'm trying to stick to the point here, which is that And I don't think you can argue this, that gender, someone with gender dysphoria using the bathroom that they identify with in a public space is that big of an issue. I really don't think it is. And I think the status quo is fine, where they do use the bathroom, and then when someone complains, they're asked to use the other one. I really don't see that as an issue. And if you want a practical solution, I said just divide off a third stall and make it a non, uh, someone that doesn't identify, or their gender identity doesn't match their biological sex. You can have that distinction. It's not that big of an issue. What you're trying to do is tie the bathroom issue to the general societal, uh, the legal and societal acceptance of gender identity, and you're trying to equate that bathroom issue with the larger issue of the suicide rate, and I'm not going to agree with that link over there.
Okay, all right, then let's move away from the whole suicide rate conversation and we'll move back to
Yeah,
what you just said, which is, okay, let's say, I think I agree with you. This is not a big issue, very small proportion of the population, not a big issue. Then why does it matter if trans people use the bathroom that they prefer? Because I think this gets back to something that I said in my opening, which was we don't start by limiting people's freedoms. We start by giving people all of the freedoms and then legislating backwards from there. And I think that it's unfair to ask a certain population of people to use a certain bathroom when we have no compelling evidence showing that there's a benefit to making them use the other bathroom. Like you're saying that there's no evidence that it benefits them to use the bathroom that they want. Okay, even if there wasn't, they want to use it, and there's no reason to keep them from going into it. So I don't see any reason why we would choose to draw that line.
because the reason for bathrooms being segregated, I said there's multiple reasons for that, and someone who is uh, has gender dysphoria using the bathroom of the opposite sex that they were born with violates some societal norms that people are uncomfortable with. And that's the basis for it. And I don't think that their discomfort using the bathroom they're born with is any more serious than the discomfort of someone with the in the correct biological sex having to witness someone with the opposite gender identity.
Okay, so you're saying that,
Yeah, I'm confused right now with did I say that clearly? The trans person in the So someone who's born male who identifies as female, or someone who's born female who identifies as male using the bathroom they identify with as opposed to the bathroom they're born with. I said
hey,
that correctly?
you lost me. I'm sorry, you kind of lost me there.
Uh, so I'm just reiterating, I just hope I said it correctly. If someone is, what I'm saying is that if someone is born a man,
Yeah.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
and they identify as a woman,
Yep.
okay, them using the male bathroom as opposed to the female bathroom is not so them using the male bathroom is not as big of a discomfort to most people as them using the female bathroom. I think I said that right.
But it doesn't matter because we don't decide what people's freedoms are based off of people being uncomfortable, right? Like,
That's the basis for the segregation of bathrooms on biological sex in the first place. I mean, if you want to, by your rationale, should be arguing for the against the segregation of bathrooms like altogether. That should really be your argument.
yeah, sure, I'm cool with that. That would not be a big deal to me. I think that that's a fair thing to say.
Okay, so
The only,
then this argument then becomes you trying to legislate societal norms,
well, no,
and that infringes on.
because I'm not trying to argue that segregation of bathrooms is something that we need to change. I'm arguing that I don't see a point to it, so people should be allowed to use whatever bathroom they want. I'm
But,
not arguing for a
but
change in infrastructure. I'm just arguing that people should be allowed to use existing infrastructure in non-invasive ways, however the hell they want.
okay, so like I said before, by saying that people should use whatever bathroom they want to, you are by definition attacking the concept of bathrooms being segregated based on biological sex in the first place.
Yes,
Do you see
I
how? Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't really see the
So
problem with that though.
okay. So then your argument really isn't that trans people should be allowed to use bathrooms anyway. Your argument is that there shouldn't be any segregation of, washroom facilities at all.
You know,
That's really your argument.
my argument is people should be allowed to use whatever the hell bathroom they want. If I really have to
Okay,
pee
and
and somebody's in the
in
guy's
public.
bathroom, I'll go in the girl's bathroom, and it doesn't matter. And in the same way,
Okay, so then
what if there's a big line for the
if
guy's
there,
bathroom and there's not one for the girl's bathroom, and I could still get into the guy's bathroom in time? I'm just gonna go into the girl's. Like, I don't think that's a big deal, and I especially don't think that's something that people should be allowed to draw policy prohibiting people from using a bathroom. You know?
it therefore holds, right? So everything you've just said literally means that you're arguing against the concept of bathrooms being segregated at all. That's your argument.
Yeah, I think that there's no purpose
Oh,
to
okay.
segregating. I think there's
Okay.
very minimal purpose to segregating bathrooms at all. I'm not arguing that we need to like desegregate the current bathrooms. I'm just saying that there's no reason to continue to build separate facilities, especially
Okay. So then your your use of you essentially you're just using gender identity and trans people as an example or an argument for why there shouldn't be any segregation of bathrooms at all. Correct?
no, I'm more trying to argue that there's like significant harm caused to trans people when they're rejected based off of their identities, and there's
But
minimal harm.
you just conceded that your argument is really that there's no basis for segregating bathrooms by gender at all, and therefore there's no purpose in segregating bathrooms full stop by any criteria. You just conceded that about 5 sentences ago.
I didn't concede that that's my argument. I concede that I think that. I don't think that there's that much
Okay,
purpose
okay, hold
to
on.
segregating it,
Okay,
but I don't think that's what we're
so,
here to talk about today.
well, well, no, but I'm trying to get to the underlying uh reasoning behind your argument. So, if you do not agree that there should be any basis for segregation, then that's your opinion. A lot of people, and I would argue that a large portion to the point where it's significant, do feel that bathrooms should be um, segregated based on biological sex for their own, comfort or personal reasons or even personal biases.
O-
So this goes
Okay,
back to the point that
so
your basis.
i-
Mhm,
if a large enough group of people decide that they are uncomfortable around people of a different race,
mhm,
how is that any different from saying that we're uncomfortable having like if we're saying that like there's a large group of people that think they're uncomfortable with having a different race in, let's say, a church building. They wouldn't be allowed to like
mhm,
a whites only church is not a legal thing. And also I would argue, I think you'd probably agree with me, not something that should exist. Like a whites only church would be
mhm.
pretty bad. In the same way, I don't think it makes sense to allow people to discriminate based off of even if we say that it's a biological reality, unless there's compelling reason why you wouldn't allow someone of another race into a certain place, you're not going to make it legal to discriminate based off of that. In the same way that you wouldn't make it legal to discriminate based off of somebody's sex unless there was compelling reason otherwise, unless we were able to show actual societal harm or personal harm being done to people as a result of letting those people use the facilities they want.
And that's why I made the distinction between race, which is a physical characteristic that you cannot change,
Sure.
and culture or gender identity or, being non-binary or any of that stuff.
Right, but
One,
sex.
regardless of whether or not it's a choice or not, that's not the point. What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, it's still a behavior that one participates in.
Okay, hold on.
Your
But
skin color is not a behavior.
I think we're losing the plot here though because like you would argue that sex is a biological reality that people cannot change, right? Would you agree with that? Or would that be your
Yep.
stance? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
then
mean, unless someone's born into or whatever, but that's,
that's a
yeah,
small enough portion of the
biological.
population that's yeah, we'll discount it for now. Um, 'Cause, 'cause, yeah, we'll, we'll just, we'll just count it for now. Um, 'cause, yeah, we'll, we'll just, we'll just count it for now. Um, 'cause, yeah, we'll, we'll just, we'll just count it for now. if you're preventing somebody from going into a bathroom based off of sex, which is a unchangeable biological reality according to you, then how is that different?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're not able to show compelling reason why you would prevent somebody from going into another place based off of an unchangeable biological reality, then you can't ban them from doing it. It's sex is an unchangeable biological reality according to you, and race is an unchangeable
But
biological reality according to you, and we're not okay with
Mhm.
discriminating based off of either. So I don't see where the
Yeah.
line is drawn just because somebody thinks that they're a different sex. Like, if somebody thinks they're white, but they're not, that doesn't change how we're allowed to treat them.
Yeah, that's fine. So, like I said, the legislation, right? There is no legislation that bans people from using the opposite gender bathroom, right? What you're arguing for is to uh, pass legislation that would ban people from being banned from using a specific bathroom, right? What I'm saying is don't have laws banning it and don't have laws enforcing it. Just
Right.
leave it the way it is, and then the way people interact, they'll be able to solve it themselves.
Do you think that it's good that we have laws that make it so that businesses can't be white only?
Yeah, but I already said that there's a difference between physical characteristic and behavior.
Right. If somebody identified as white, you wouldn't treat them any differently, right?
No. I mean, culturally, you may have like, how would you say it? Like, people, how would you say it? Like when people are around white people, they talk a certain way, or there's certain like in jokes, and when they're around black people or Hispanic people, you might like, but
Okay,
like, yeah,
yeah,
you're not gonna
yeah,
discriminate.
right. In the same way, I'm arguing that we should be for legislation that stops people from discriminating on the basis of biological sex unless we have compelling reason otherwise. Because you're arguing that we people should be able to, or businesses, private businesses, should be able to discriminate based off of biological sex. It doesn't matter what their intent is. It doesn't matter what the intent of somebody is. If somebody is if there was a whites only church and somebody that was black goes into this whites only church and says identify as white and you kick them out, it's still wrong, right? It's still discrimination based off of a biological reality. It's just that maybe the biological reality and their identity doesn't line up, but that doesn't change the fact that you're discriminating based off of a biological reality and you don't have a compelling reason to do so. So unless you were able to show a compelling
Right.
reason, it wouldn't make sense to.
hmm So right now you're saying that you want to pass legislation that prevents bathrooms being segregated based off of biological sex.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Not prevents bathrooms from being segregated, basically, but prevents businesses from
But that's what
banning
you just
people
said.
from using a certain
So,
bathroom. I
and
think
so de facto, you are arguing for bath banning people from segregating bathrooms based off of biological sex.
no, because in the same way that we legislate that there can't be whites only churches, and yet there are some churches that have a greater population of white people that use them based off of cultural factors. It's the same way with bathrooms. We may have a percentage, like a large percentage of people, almost all of them would be biological women, born biological women, using a certain bathroom. That doesn't mean that other people can't go in there and use that bathroom, right? In the same way that we
Okay,
might have a
so
church
yeah,
that's mostly
correct.
white people.
You want to pass legislation that bans segregating bathroom based off of biological sex, right?
No, I'm saying that I want to pass legislation
That's
that
what you're saying. Like
no,
because then that's literally what you're saying though.
no, I'm not saying that people can like shouldn't be allowed to have bathrooms that have certain labels on them. I'm saying that enforcing
But then that's just enforcing the labels. So you're saying you can have labels, but you can't enforce it.
to an extent, yeah.
So then, like I said, so then what's the point in having labels in the first place? So then you're arguing for there
There,
not being any segregation based on bathrooms. So, and you're arguing to enforce legislation that bans segregation of
no, because
watering
I'm not saying that
facilities
you
based
can't
on
put the
sex.
label on there. Like, uh,
But then by putting the label on there, you're essentially implying discrimination, are you not? By saying this is where the women type should go. If a church had a sign that had a picture of a white guy on it, right?
hmm
What are you going to infer from that? Would there be an uproar that what are you trying to say that black people can't go in here? Oh no, legally you're allowed to come in here, but it's the same argument you're making.
but I'm okay with not discriminating on who you, like I'm okay with not segregating bathrooms at all. Sure, I would also be
Yeah, I
okay with not
understand.
segregating bathrooms at all. I don't see a reason why we should
Okay,
segregate them.
so that's so you're trying to legally enforce banning segregation based on of bathrooms based on biological sex. That's your argument
No,
fundamentally.
no, I think that I would have to think about that more before I could take a position on it. What I'm arguing is that
Literally what you're saying, bro.
I'm not arguing that
I
you
just
can't put
walked you
labels
through.
on the doors.
Just,
I'm literally
okay,
just saying
but
that people should be able to use the bathroom
put
despite
labels,
the label on it.
if you put labels on the door, right?
Right.
Okay, are you not categorizing the two people based on biological
Okay.
sex?
Okay. This is the division though. Is I'm not saying that you make categories based off of a biological sex and segregate bathrooms based off of a biological sex. I'm saying
You can put
that the
signs
no no
there.
no. I'm saying that the signs on bathrooms are a result of a sociological concept. They're
I
essentially a
think they're
societal
based off
concept.
biological. No, I disagree with that. They're based off of biological sex, which has been what humanity has been doing for the past million years.
But isn't that kind of the whole point? Is like, okay, why would we base these off of biological sex if certain people don't fit in those categories? And we can make more inclusive
Because
categories that benefit people.
there's small enough a segment of the population where it doesn't have to be legislated, where they can use a bathroom, and if they're asked to use the other one, it's a non-issue. And I think where I've never met, okay, I'll be honest, 'cause I've had a lot of debates with regards to gender dysphoria with uh people who are transgender and non-binary and stuff. I've never met anyone that said if someone's uncomfortable with me using this bathroom, I wouldn't just use the other one. Most people are like, dude, I just need to take a piss. If you don't want me to use this one, I'll go in the other one. So
I,
it's really arguing legislation, which the legal ramifications of that and the legal deductions that can be drawn from that, the consequences of that are going to be massive because all of a sudden you can now, if bathrooms are segregated based on sex, based on sex, then every other societal norm that is based on sex is gonna now legally be banned. All of a sudden, women's sports is gonna be banned, for example. That's a big factor. You're gonna affect people's whole lives like that. So what
no,
I'm
because
trying
I
to
think
say is
that
that
you're
rather
missing the division here though.
than having enforced legislation forcing people how to behave, just leave it the way it is.
But I'm
Okay,
not.
so don't have
It's not
legislation
forcing
anymore.
people how to
I'm not
behave to
saying
allow
even
people to do
it's
what they
given
want.
by look, all right, let's walk this through.
Okay.
Let me walk you through this.
All
Okay.
right. All right.
So you are saying that dividing um you want to introduce legislation, right?
Yeah.
That prevent people from being banned from using the opposite bathroom, right?
I want. Oh, are you saying this is what I want,
So you
or
want
is this a hypothetical?
dude, bro, you gotta. I'm only 24, but you gotta treat me like a boomer on this stuff, right? So most trans people do. They're really friendly to me because I'm quite ignorant
No. Yeah, you're
with
good.
like using terms stuff, but accommodating. Um,
Yeah.
you're trying to say that you want to introduce legislation where if that would ban someone that was born male that identified as female from being banned from using a female bathroom, right?
Right. Okay.
Okay, all right. So what I'm trying to say is the consequence of that is that you are going to ban discrimination based off of biological sex, correct? In
Okay.
public bathroom.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Therefore, therefore, if you pass that legislation, it will no longer be legal, okay, to divide bathrooms based on biological sex, right?
Okay.
Okay. Therefore, you cannot have segregated bathrooms based off of biological sex, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So you can put labels on bathrooms saying one is for male, and you can't have the male sign on one and the female sign on the other then. Correct?
But that, like, you're missing the point that those signs don't have to be tied to a biological reality. They don't have to be tied to a biological
Okay,
reality. Like, if I put a
but
label,
the vast majority of people when they go to a bathroom, right, they're gonna look and be like, which one's got the stick man like that and which has got the lady triangle with the dress, okay? That's what
right,
most people look at,
right, but we
right?
don't see like a dick and
Okay,
balls on one side and a vagina on the other side, right?
I know, I know you don't. Yeah, you don't see, more explicit indicators of biological identity. You see the social manifestations of it,
Because
right?
it's about the
But
social manifestation.
but
It's
you can't
about how those social structures are built.
make like one a green tick, another one a pink circle, right? It doesn't make a difference. The point is that you can't then have indicators on the bathroom based on biological sex, regardless of what those are. Correct? By your own legislation. Is that not the case?
Sure, a stick figure and then a stick figure wearing a dress are not really biological
Okay.
indicators, right? They're just kind of tied to the societal images.
Okay, but the societal images
Are not
correct in like 90% of cases.
right.
So
I'm just arguing
what
that
people
in that other percentage of cases, we shouldn't
okay, no.
allow people to like
Well, I'm
draw a line and make it illegal. Or not illegal,
okay,
but
I'm
okay,
saying
yeah, trespassing,
I'm
so yeah,
trying to
illegal.
show how I'm trying to show how that may be your intention, and I'm not saying I'm shorts, and I believe personally it's coming from a good heart, and that you're literally trying to accommodate and make people's lives better. What I'm saying is that the consequence of the legislation you pass is that it's going to be illegal to have a bathroom with a dress on it and a bathroom with a suit on it. And that's going to be extremely, how would you say it? This is going to have massive societal ramifications for 90% of the population because
Okay.
people are going to be confused.
All right, I have a
And you're going to
question.
have the outrage and the, yeah, go ahead.
All right, I have a question for you. I just want to check really quick. Sparrow, are we good on time? Can we keep going or? Sorry, we cannot hear you if you're saying anything. You might want to just drop it in the chat. Um,
Uh,
just want to make sure we're good on time. Because I'm good to keep going if
there's,
you are, but
I can give you about another 20 minutes probably.
okay, yeah, okay, cool. So, why don't we go to like, you've got EST up, right? You want to go for like
Yeah, if
4:20, and then we'll call it there. It's a good time.
yeah, if you two are happy to go for another 20 minutes, you're more than welcome.
Cool. All right. Okay. So, I think that where we are not seeing eye to eye is there are different levels of legitimacy for discriminations, right? So, like a discrimination based off of a biological reality may have more or less validity than a discrimination based off of a societal concept. But also within that,
Okay.
a discrimination based off of a biological reality may have more legitimacy in certain situations. For example, I think that the transgender people in sports debate is really nuanced. I'm glad you brought it up. I think it's really nuanced. I think that it's a tough question. I'm not even sure where I really stand on it. I want people to feel at home, but I also
Right now, sports, it's a horrible idea. I fight. I've had, 6 MMA fights, 2 boxing fights. I had a
mhm,
bunch of kickboxing
yeah,
fights. If you put a guy on estrogen in the ring with a woman, she's gonna beat that living crap out of them, and people can go to hospital. That's what
okay.
happened in Thailand.
Okay, yeah.
That
I
lady was
think
cracking
I,
open.
I think that's
It's
a
a
whole
horrible
separate
idea.
discussion. But I think that there's what we need to make is the distinction between the legitimacy of two people discriminating against two people where that discrimination matters and where it doesn't. So, for example, when you bring up sports, there's grounds for discrimination there because people could get hurt as a result, right? And we've seen people get we you know, I don't want to get into that right now, but there's a debate there on whether or not there are negative effects if we take that discrimination away. We've seen no negative effects if we take away the discrimination with bathrooms. And furthermore, taking away people's right to legally enforce discrimination based off of a biological concept is not the same as taking away people's right to discriminate against a sociological or a societal concept. Like, I think that the suits and dresses thing is fine. I don't really I've met plenty of women that only wear pants, and I've met a few guys that even like to wear dresses. Whatever. But and that's fine, but like it doesn't fit into the societal whole, right? That's what people are really making the distinction based off of. It's not based off of whether or not you're actually biologically a guy or a girl. It's based off of whatever the hell you want to be seen as.
Okay, so then I'm going back to my initial point, right? Which is that your legislation, right? You have to concede this. There's no way around it. Is gonna ban having male and female signs on bathrooms, correct?
No,
Indications of biological. You can't have indications of biological gender on a bathroom.
My argument
Because
is that those aren't an indicator of biological sex, right? Like, there's no dick and balls
they
on a
are.
bathroom sign. I'm sorry if that is too explicit. I can get away from
So
it, but
you're
like,
arguing that. So then now you get into the point where. So what you now have to do is, where do most people view the discrimination in bathroom as? Gender identity or biological sex? And I can tell you from experience, bro, most people, first of all, they don't even understand what the hell is going on with the gender identity thing. As far as they're concerned, there's biological men, there's biological females, and the bathroom is based off of that. When you introduce your legislation, right, it's going to ban that, because the legislation is going to ban the indications of gender identity or whatever. And for most people, that is one-to-one correlated, indistinguishable from biological sex.
but
Because no one in Arkansas or Mississippi over the age of 60 is going to look at a bathroom sign with a dress on it and be like, oh, that could be a man in a dress or a female in a dress. I'm free to use whichever one. You're just going to cause absolute chaos for people. And more importantly, that's really not that much of an issue. People can get used to it, right?
but I'm not.
Fundamentally, what I'm saying is the consequences and the deductions based off of the legislation that you are proposing are going to lead to new laws and new potential legislations that are going to be a lot more harmful. That's what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that let me iterate my point, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Should people be allowed to wear a dress and go into the female's bathroom? Quite frankly, I'm a guy, it's really not my business. If women are saying they're uncomfortable with it or whatever, what I'm saying is that you should be very careful before you pass legislation that enforces it. Because right now, if you want to say that there's legislation that bans it and you're against the banning, okay, all right, I can concede that. What I'm arguing against is legislation that enforces someone's right to use a specific bathroom. Because the consequence of that, the only way you're able to do that is by removing the segregation based on biological gender altogether.
Okay, no,
That's the
because
only way you're able to.
I think that there's a good way to illustrate that this is not true. When somebody is transgender, and let's say they transition from being a male to a female, which do you think that they more often wear? Feminine clothing or masculine clothing?
I mean, I don't know.
If they
Probably feminine.
if they transition to being a female, they're probably going to dress more feminine. They're probably going to act more feminine, which is a societal concept. I'm not arguing that you couldn't have labels based off of societal concepts. That seems pretty fair. But I am arguing that there are very few bathrooms. Personally, I've never seen one that says biological males only and biological females only, and I'm totally fine, which I
Okay,
think is what the legislation would remove, because like I'm not arguing that you can't discriminate based off of societal concepts. I think you can in some cases and you can't in some cases. I don't
but
think
the societal concept is based on biology, not gender identity. This is the point I'm trying to make.
right, but not entirely, right? Because like what's the biological
Yeah, but that's
basis for women wearing more dresses?
first of all, that's the reality for the legal legislature. It's also the reality for most people. You can't, just because you have this paradigm, right, that is sound and, it makes sense in your head and it's true for trans people and a certain amount of college educated people that understand this whole thing. You can't enforce that on the vast majority of the population.
But there's no
It's not
enforcing,
fair.
right? Like what would have to
No,
change
but
as a result of this
that's what I'm
legislation?
trying to say. I
Hello.
just
Okay.
stated that first of all, the initial legal ramification is that separating bathrooms based on biological sex altogether is illegal, and you conceded that. You conceded that point, and
Yeah.
it's impossible for you to. Okay, so if you ban segregation based on biological sex in bathrooms, then it creates a whole other wormhole you can go down under. What other biological segregations do we have that we need to ban? What are the consequences of that? It's gonna create such a big issue, and it's quite frankly, it's gonna turn around and cause more discrimination for trans
Wait,
people.
but I think that
If your
there's a
goal
conversation we
is
need to have, though, right? Like, we need to have a conversation about where these discriminations do and don't make sense to make. Like, a similar
okay,
conversation
but
was had when.
okay, so then let's have an entire conversation about every single facet in which there is any biological discrimination with regards to race, gender, whatever, every single one. And then once we've identified that and the ramifications of every single one, then we can go ahead and discuss passing legislation that enforces that.
Or,
Until
hear
then,
me
let's
out,
not do it.
we just handle it on a case by case
Or
basis
just
because there's so many
I'm
facets to it that you could
interrupting
never possibly
you.
manage to, like, look at everything and the biological, like, discrimination
Speaking
and
to a
whether or not that would have.
reasonable,
Okay, sure, to a reasonable
degree.
degree. But we can agree that the effects of the biological discrimination can be different from area to area. So why focus on all of them when we can just focus on one, figure out whether or not that's
Because as
harmful?
I said, the ramifications of that are much larger, and you're trying to minimize it. It's not going to stop at just bathrooms. There's an entire societal basis that's founded upon the differences in biological gender that are going to start to, it's going to fracture. It's going to cause a lot of chaos for a lot of people.
Okay.
So rather than enforcing legislation, right? Okay, that one way or another is for or against, why don't you just leave the status quo? And most people, even who are trans that I've spoken to, and I understand that's anecdotal, right? But most people really don't. They're like, okay, if I'm told that someone's uncomfortable, I'm just going to use the other bathroom. And that solution works.
Hmm.
Or if you want, just have like a handicap stall that has a whatever you identify as, you can use this too. It's not that big of a deal that you have to enforce it, because once you enforce legislation, it becomes a whole. The ramifications of that are they can just expand. It's exponential, right? Just it starts to affect this, starts to affect that. It just grows and grows. Rather than, first of all, giving the authority to the government to legislate where you can or cannot piss, right? Rather than doing that, okay, how about just leave the status quo and things work themselves out? You can have, you can pressure a business through your economic activity, and from that you can affect policy. Keep the government legislation out of it.
Okay,
That's my
I
point.
think that you ran off though, because this isn't a legislation that would determine where people can and can't go to the bathroom. It's a legislation that would allow
It
people to
does.
go to the bathroom wherever the hell they wanted, right?
Like 5 minutes ago that it does. It does. It
Right,
does.
it's a
By
can, but it's not
creating
a
this.
can't.
No, it's not. Okay. It's not a can, because what I'm trying to say is that all on the surface it is a can, but I've just walked you through it and showed that in reality, right, it is literally banning the concept of segregation of any bathroom based on biological sex. You conceded that, right?
Okay,
Okay. And
yes,
so
but
for
I would
a
argue
lot of
that
people,
most of the
that's what
bathrooms are already not
a lot of
segregated based off of biological sex because nobody's going in there and checking what the sex of each person is, right? It's just
no, but
You're only going to be
But
weirded out
it
if you see somebody that doesn't look like how
people
you think.
for most people and for the vast majority of society, there's no distinction between biological sex and gender identity. They don't even think about their gender identity. All they know is I'm born a guy, I'm a guy. So in their mind, and therefore in the vast majority of people, and therefore, and when the legislation, which there isn't any, but the societal norms that are biologically driven for the past million years is based on biology, is based on the biological sex, not the gender identity. So de facto, the way people view the segregation of bathrooms is based off of biological, not gender. Biological sex, not gender sex. Gender identity. Stop
Okay,
mixing the shit up. That's my
in
point.
admitting that
But I
not
got
everyone. Oh, sorry. Do you need to go? Sometimes, Sam.
nah. I can give you like 2 3 minutes, man.
All right, cool.
Go ahead.
Do we
Do
just
you
want
want
to
me
go
to
to
do
Q&A
closing
now
points?
then? Because I think we still have to go to and then we can just I can probably just
Okay,
fit
like
everything in the closing
Yeah,
if that's cool.
why don't we go ahead and do the closing statements?
All right, cool.
I mean,
Um,
I think I just did mine, so I'll let you. I mean, mine was basically if I think I summed up my argument, so I'll let you go ahead and just do yours.
All right. Okay. So I think that throughout this debate, I've managed to show that we don't legislate based off of what people cannot do, but what people we start with the most free, and then we legislate down to get rid of things that infringe on other people's freedoms. I think that legislation, passing it specifically to stop people from discriminating based off of a biological thing, is separate from saying that people can discriminate based off of a societal thing. Because many of the signs that you see on bathrooms nowadays are not biologically tied, people aren't standing at the door and checking what biological sex you have. No legislation that banned discrimination based off of biology would be tied to getting rid of all of those signs. And frankly, unless you're able to, somehow tie together that the status quo and biology are inextricably, completely tied together, then you would have to tell me like why that matters and how banning something that's biological immediately gets rid of the status quo. I think that we just have to kind of open everything up and let people do what they want. And if we see harm, we work backwards. But I don't see any reason to discriminate off of a biological reality. I think that we just let people flow into the categories that they want to be in society, and things will go just fine. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for that closing statement, Jax. Kaiser Sultan, did you want to make a closing statement, or would you prefer to just go straight into questions?
My point is that legislating it is going to cause a bunch of essential. You don't know what's. It's going to cause a bunch of side effects, so let's stay away from that. Just keep the norm and let people use what they do, and if someone has an issue, they can complain, and the guy can use the other one. That's my point.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. We have a question from Jihad, and this question is for Kaiser Sultan. Why do they think their argument that preventing sex segregation in toilets will lead to other policies isn't a slippery slope fallacy?
Because I mean, I illustrated. I think we went over this, right? But the example I gave, I think, was that if you ban it in bathrooms, then you're gonna start to the attack is gonna be on segregating sports, for example, and then in combat sports, that's gonna lead to injury and possibly death.
All right, thank you. And then this question is also from Jihan, and it's for you, Jax. Why were they hesitant to agree with removing gender signs from toilet doors?
I think that there is a concept that's societal that people separate, and I think that there's a concept that's biological. I don't think that those things are inextricably tied to each other. I think that a lot of people feel that their biology matches up with the societal labels placed on them. But I also think that the most beneficial thing we can do is allow people to think what they want and act based off of the societal categories that they want to. If there's a big societal push to completely desegregate bathrooms societally, that's fine. But I think that the majority of people nowadays are not seeing any psychological harm from a societal segregation. I do think there's harm from a biological segregation, and that's why I'm arguing that trans people should be allowed to use the bathroom they prefer, and there should be legislation in place to prevent businesses from discriminating based off of biological realities.
Gotcha. Thank you. And we have another question from Let's Farm. Wouldn't stalls for all pretty much solve this problem? I mean, who has a urinal at home?
Do you know who
I
that's
think that
for?
might be for both. I think that could be for both of you.
It's cool for me. Urinals are pretty awkward anyways.
I mean, it wasn't that what I was saying. Just have like that's just the sort of just the evolution of my idea of having a third one. You just have like individual stalls with a toilet and a sink,
Yeah, but we don't
and like
distinguish like based off of stalls. Like there's not sex signs on the stalls,
that's
right?
what I'm
It's just big rooms
saying.
full of stalls.
That's what I'm saying. You have like a line of like your bathroom right in your house, right? It's got a seat, it's got a sink and a mirror in front of it, right? So just have like 10 of those lined up. So you can go in there, do your thing, you come out, you don't gotta interact with anyone, you don't see anyone, you don't gotta do that awkward thing where you wash your hands and gotta look at the guy next to you like, hey, please don't make a yeah,
Yeah,
I'm fine
I
with
know
it.
what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Yeah. I don't know how feasible that it is to have individual bathrooms everywhere, but I know what you're saying. It's awkward.
I, you know what? I really think it would actually save money in the long term, right? Because all that stupid expensive tiling and if you think about like an airport bathroom, right? They have like 4 stalls, a bunch of walk space, okay? If you made like cubicle sized stalls for everyone, right? You could put like 6 of those or 7 of those in the space where you have 2 seats, 2 urinals, and a giant disabled one.
Maybe next time we should have a
I think
debate on whether or not we should have like individual stalls versus a big like, multi-stall bathroom. That should be our
I'm
next.
fine with visual. You can
I,
pick your nose, you can blow your nose, you can. It's good, man.
Cool,
I have
cool.
another question. Uh, what would be the problem with public restrooms being co-ed everywhere?
I think that's for you, Kaiser.
It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. That's my point. It's a lot of like I know women in my life are extremely uncomfortable with that, and I know a lot of people that are uncomfortable with that. And you know what? I think what this really illustrates is the difference between like people that are up to date with where gender discussions and societal roles, all that stuff is going, and people that are not. And so I think that kind of reflects that. I think a lot of people are just unaware of what's going on, and they're just really they don't know what's going on, and they're quite like uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I would try to prevent that.
All right, thank you for that. Did you have any response, Jax?
No, I think I'm good on that one.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that is the end of the questions. So I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. And I hope that you enjoyed our show. If either debater would like to do a little self promotion, now's your chance to plug your channel and drop any links into the chat if you'd like. Thanks again for coming, everybody. And please remember, let's not fight, let's debate the topics, and let's talk about the issues. Thank you.
Kaiser, you got any
So if you'd like,
channel you want to plug?
I ain't gonna dox myself. I'll let you plug your stuff though. Go ahead.
All right, yeah. You can find me on YouTube. My is JaxDebate0, and I will go ahead and drop the channel link in the chat right now. I don't know. This chat stays up after the call's off, right?
yes.
Okay, yeah. So just drop that there. And yeah, it's also got a link tree on it with everything else. You can see all my shit Twitter takes if you'd like, but
No, I'm banned off Twitter. I can't see nothing.
yeah, that's probably for the best, right? I think everybody being banned off Twitter would probably be for the best. A lot of times I think that it's bad for my health.
It was fun while it lasted.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Kaiser. You were great. It was really nice talking to you.
Yeah, thanks. I messed up all the gender word this that, but I'm getting the hang of it.
You're doing great.
That's all right.
All right,
You
man.
know what?
All right,
We're fine with people who are just learning and getting experience here. We are all new at it. Most of us are, and so that's all right. We are welcoming everybody, and we're excited to have you, and we appreciate you being here.
I appreciate your time, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.